Now you know why I'm so proud of my boy. Ira?
Okay. Thank you. The story I'm going to tell tonight is about surprise. Science is all about surprise. Scientists love to be surprised. And when they tell you they're looking for the Higgs boson, they would rather not find it, actually, when you talk to them, because they can still hunt for it and be surprised about finding it later. It's almost disappointing for some of them to actually find it. And you discover this. I've been doing Science Friday for 22 years now. And we will continue to do it for as many years as we can. And during those years, I've interviewed a lot of scientists, and they always, as people, will surprise you by what they say. They are people, and you think you know how they're thinking, you think you know what they're thinking, you've read all about them, you've worked with them over the years, but they will surprise you nonetheless. For example, Oliver Sacks. You know who Oliver Sacks is, the neuroscientist? Yes, he's written a lot of interesting books. And he always comes on Science Friday when he has a new book out. And so one time he was scheduled to come on Science Friday and talk about his new book. And he's such a great interview. We all like to talk to him, but we always give him an hour to talk. Say, come on for an hour, because we really isn't long enough, but that's all we have. But this time, we had a special event, and we could not put an hour for Oliver Sacks. So we called up his producer, his assistant, and we said, you know, we're very sorry. We would like to interview Oliver for an hour, but we can only do 40 minutes. Well, why not? Well, because we have an opportunity no one has ever had before. Someone is searching for a giant squid in the South Pacific. And we have an opportunity to interview the captain of the boat, the scientist on the boat, live for 20 minutes before the end of the hour. So we can only put Oliver on for 40 minutes and not the last 20. I said, I'm sorry, you know. It was a long silence, and the handler said, are you kidding? I thought we were losing Oliver forever. He said, giant squid, that's Oliver's favorite subject. I kid you not. Would you allow him to sit through that whole interview and let him stay on as you're interviewing the scientist? Let him sit there and listen, maybe? We'd be very happy to have him come on for 40 minutes. I said, wow, I never knew this about Oliver. I knew all this kind of stuff would happen. This is very surprising. So sure enough, Friday came around, and Oliver Sacks comes walking into the studio with a T-shirt with a giant squid on it. And in each hand, he has a rubber squid that he is squeezing in one hand after the other. As like a kid in a candy shop, he's going to talk about the giant squid. So I said, Oliver, sit down, and we talk about his book, and I can see that he's squirming to get on to the next interview, where he's not really that interested in his book. So sure enough, 40 minutes after the hour, we come on, and I said, Oliver, you can sit here and wait through the interview if you'd like. We're going to talk to him. He says, yeah, please, let me sit down and wait with you. So we get the captain of the boat on, and he starts talking about his search for the giant squid. And Oliver says, can I ask him a question? Go for it. And he starts talking to him. I could sit back and put my feet up now. I know he's doing the interview and talking to the scientist looking for the giant squid. So surprised, so much stuff that you never expect scientists to happen. The other small surprising event I'll talk to you about is when Jane Goodall has been on our program, yes, many times. About 10 years ago, I'm going to pull that out of my head because I'm not quite sure she's been on so many times. She came on the program, and once again, we gave her like an hour to herself. And I like to get calls in. It's a talk show, and I like to get the listeners in. And I had used up so much of the hour just in a great conversation with her that I had looked at my watch. I had about 2 minutes left. I have to take one call. Let's go to one call. Guy's on the phone. He says, Dr. Goodall, it's so great to talk to you. Thank you for being on the program. Do you think there is another primate out there that we haven't discovered yet? Gee, I hadn't even thought about asking that myself. And she said, yeah, there really is one. And he said, well, do you think that you're going to actually discover it? She says, yeah, I think we're getting closer and closer. So I said, wait, time out. I'm the third person in this room, and I don't know what the both of you are talking about. Obviously, you two do. But I'm going to take a guess. Are you talking about Sasquatch? Yeti? The abominable snowman? And she said, yes, we are. That's what we're talking about. And I said, Dr. Goodall, do you think that you actually can find one? She says, well, we have fibers now, hairs that have been taken off of trees and things, and maybe we can do DNA analysis and actually figure out what this thing really is. But I really believe that it does exist. My director says in my head, time's up, you're out of time. And it turns out that she had come on in subsequent years and in years that have, she's always admitted that she does believe in the existence of Sasquatch. She wrote a foreword to a book that was entitled The Science of Sasquatch, which did not take any side one way or the other, but just presented the evidence. So my story tonight, and I'll conclude it, is that we are always surprised in doing science as science journalists, and it's such a pleasure to find scientists who are willing to talk and tell us why they are surprised and to share their surprises with us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Ira. The next speaker never ceases to surprise me, so go ahead.
Okay. Lawrence, before I begin, I just thought I would, you said that we're all sharing molecules from the breath breathed by Feynman, but you didn't say how that can be true. And so I would like to add information to this, that it is true because for every breath you take, you inhale more molecules of air than there are breaths of air in the entire Earth's atmosphere. And it's because of this fact that any time someone has exhaled in the past, there are enough molecules to spread into everyone's breath. And so what is true for Feynman would be true for any person throughout history, including Genghis Khan, Beethoven, Jesus, whoever is your person.
No, real people.
You are sharing.
Time's up. No, it's okay.
All right. So it was the 1700s, and William Herschel, the most famous astronomer of his day, who had the biggest telescope around, making discoveries that only the biggest of its kind would give you. Because in astrophysics and in particle physics, bigger is actually better. In all cases, essentially. Big telescopes, big particle accelerators, we're together on that one. William Herschel is very well known. He's wealthy. He's funded by the King of England, King George. By the way, that's the George of American Revolution fame, the one where John Hancock wrote large so that even King George will be able to see the signature. Herschel, kind of by accident, discovers a planet beyond Saturn, the first human being ever to make such a discovery. All planets closer to the sun than what Herschel discovered are quite visible to the unaided eye at night. So no one person is credited with any of their discoveries. Cavemen saw these planets. So he wanted to name it after his funder, which is what any good scientist would do if you want to keep the money flowing. So for a brief period there, about 5 years or 7 years or so, the solar system was Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and George. I have books from that slice of time that enumerates the planets, and there's George right there. So clearer heads would ultimately prevail, and the planet would be named for Roman gods, as the other planets have been named, and thus was born Uranus. However, you didn't want to piss off the British, because they were really powerful at the time, and so as sort of recompense, the moons of the planet Uranus, rather than named for Greek characters in the life of the Greek counterpart of the Roman god after whom the planet is named, so for example, Jupiter has Ganymede, one of its moons. Ganymede was the manservant of Zeus. Zeus is the corresponding god to Jupiter. In that way, the Greek and Roman heritage of this whole activity is honored. So Uranus is the lone exception in the solar system to this, and all of its planets are named after Shakespearean fictional characters. That to keep the British calm. Now, I say all this, and that's not even the story I'm going to tell you. I'm going to talk about his son, John Herschel. John Herschel, also an astronomer, not quite as well known as William, but in my field we all know who and what he is and what he accomplished. One of the things he did in the early 1800s was essentially invent color photography. He made major contributions to putting an image of reality onto something that captured that reality for others to share. Arguably one of the most important inventions for the recording of scientific data there ever was. That was in 1839. He called it the cyanotype. Time would move on. We would not perfect color photography for a century after that, really, but photography was born in the mid-1800s. The first war to be captured by photography was the American Civil War, the 1860s. Film was not very sensitive to light, so you had to sit for long periods of time. That's why there were no action photos from the middle of the 1800s. And in fact, if you were posed for the photo and you just like scratched your nose, you were a blur in the image. Now, why? I'm taking you down this road because in that era, for the first time, a portrait of you did not require an artist. You would hire an artist if you were wealthy to paint your picture. And you'd want it to be accurate or make you possibly look a little better. Over that period, from 1840 through the 1860s, all of a sudden, art did not have to capture reality. It was no longer the obligation of the artist because we had photographs to do that. And in that period, Impressionism was born, where the artist said, I'm not going to paint what I see, I'm going to paint what this image feels like to me. 1888, we're still in this period. Van Gogh, in the early morning hours. Van Gogh paints. I know some of you were worried I didn't have a cosmic tie on or my vest. I wasn't going to let you down. All right, so he paints this. It's called The Starry Night. And I bring up this painting for several reasons. First, we know it was painted in the pre-dawn hours because that's the only way the moon can be angled that way towards the horizon in the northern hemisphere. That makes this pre-dawn. We're pretty sure the brightest of these stars is Venus. Venus, the planets are typically what come out first in the evening, which is why most of your wishes have not come true. You've been wishing on planets. All right. So, that's just how that works. But planets can also be in the early morning sky, as was this painting. By my read of paintings ever drawn, when I look at this, there's a foreground. There's a cypress tree. There's a village. There's a church steeple. But he didn't call the painting Sleepy Village, cypress tree, church steeple, hills. It is the first painting that I know of. I don't claim perfect knowledge, but I looked hard. It is the first painting I know of where the background is the subject of the painting. And that background is the night sky. And it is elevated the cosmos to become fair game to the artist. And I submit to you that scientific discovery, especially cosmic discovery, does not become mainstream until the artists embrace the fruits of those discoveries. So I applaud Vincent van Gogh for thinking that the sky is what mattered more than anything else in the foreground for this painting. And one point which I will end on because my time has run out. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Neil.
Yeah. So, I forgot what I was going to say.
Start over.
So,
the sky is the subject of the painting.
yes, thank you.
The first time in history.
Thank you, sir. Right.
The sky has entered the mainstream.
The sky is the subject of the painting.
The sky is the mainstream.
Over that time, from the 1880s into the 1900s, many discoveries were being published. Newspapers came of age in a big way so that the dissemination of cosmic discovery was shared by all. And I submit that opened up a new era of the public awareness of cosmic discovery. The popularity of Einstein in 1905, right up through 1916, that continued to rise because media took charge. And so I see that as sort of a watershed period that is continuing to this day with things such as the World Science Festival. The fact that there are radio programs that value this, that people listen to and care about. One last point. I had criticized the sky over the sinking ship of the Titanic to Jim Cameron. I was nipping at his heels for 10 years on this, and he finally actually fixed the night sky. And and called me a son of a bitch, but in a loving way. It was a loving son of a bitch. I was asked, given how nitpicky I was about the wrong sky over Kate Winslet as she floated on that plank, they said, what do I think about the Van Gogh sky? Clearly that's not accurate. My reply was, In the case of the artist, I don't want them to represent reality because I have that via my own telescopes. I want and I need the artist to take me to new places. And the new place Van Gogh took me is not the sky as it is, but the sky as he felt it. And the more of us that feel the universe, the better off we will be in this world. Thank you.
Back on. Put it back on. There you go. 12 minutes. Right. I think we have some time left. I do want to say two things. First of all, you notice Pluto is not on this chart. And secondly,
Get over it.
And are you sure?
And what really, actually, the other thing that really worried me for those of us backstage in the dressing room was, well, you haven't seen the underwear, but in any case, moving from something to something else. I don't want to say it. Let me call on Richard. Thank you.
Without ever violating the laws of physics in any way whatsoever, Darwinian natural selection has put together on this planet, and I would conjecture on rather a lot of other planets as well, something utterly extraordinary. The world of complexity, which is unknown to physicists, the world of complexity, which is the world of biology, and on this planet at least has produced the human brain, which is capable of understanding the process that gave rise to it, capable of making a model of the universe in which we stand. I have coined the phrase the genetic book of the dead to describe the gene pool of a species, in the sense that the chisels of the sculptor, which is natural selection, work away at carving the shape of the gene pool of the ancestors of every animal and plant alive, carving it into the shape required for the animals concerned to survive in their particular environment. And what that means is that the gene pool of, say, a camel is a kind of description of ancestral deserts. The gene pool of an antelope is a description of the savanna of the ancestors. It's a description of the lions or leopards that the ancestors escaped from. And reciprocally, the gene pool of a lion is a coded description of the prey that the ancestral lions caught. So the gene pool of every species is a unique informational description of the ancestral worlds in which they survived. And mostly all the genes in the gene pool share the same ancestral history. They all share the same, we could almost call it, experience of the past, ancestral experience. But wouldn't it be interesting to find a place where some of the genes in the gene pool have had a different ancestral experience from others? This would be a critical, almost an experimental test. And I want to tell you a story about one such example. Cuckoos. The European cuckoo parasitizes quite a large number of different species. You know they're brood parasites. You know that the female does not lay an egg in her own nest. She goes and finds a nest of a host species. It might be a hedge sparrow, it might be a meadow pipit, it might be a reed warbler, it might be a robin, and deposits an egg in the nest, having removed one egg from the host nest. The young cuckoo hatches out first, before its foster siblings, and then the first thing it does is to toss out the eggs of the other of the foster species. The young cuckoo, the first thing it does, it gets the egg into a sort of hollow in its back, and it shuffles its way backwards over the edge of the nest, tosses the egg out. Obviously, it has no idea why it does it. It's got no idea of anything very much. This is built into the nervous system. And the cuckoo has many, many other fascinating adaptations to its brood parasitic way of life. Now, here's the point. The same species, Cuculus canorus, the same species parasitizes a large number of different host species, and when it lays an egg in each of the nests, each host species, the eggs mimic those of the host species. So when a female cuckoo lays an egg in a reed warbler nest, the egg that it lays looks like reed warbler eggs. When it lays it in meadow pipit nests, the egg is dark, almost black. It looks like a meadow pipit egg, and so on. How can this happen? How can the female cuckoo possibly produce the right kind of egg, given that it's got the same genes as all the other cuckoos in the species? It's all one species. It's a bit of a mystery, and the answer is almost certainly known, and it comes back to my point about different parts of the gene pool having different experience. Each female cuckoo learns the nature of the nest in which she herself was brought up. So there are females who are brought up in robin nests, and they return when they're adults to robin nests and lay eggs in robin nests. A female that was brought up in a reed warbler nest, when she grows up, she will return to reed warbler nests. Well, that's all very well, but they're still the same species. Now, here's the thing. As you know, in mammals, sex determination is done by an XX-XY system, such that males have different sex chromosomes. One is called Y, one is called X. Females have the same X and X. And if you work it out, when you cross an XX and an XY, 50% of the offspring will be XY male, 50% will be XX female. So a Y chromosome in a mammal like us has only had experience of male bodies back through history. X chromosomes have had, 2/3 of their time in female bodies and 1/3 in, have I got that right? I can't be bothered to work it out. But the point is that in birds, it's the other way round. In birds, it's the female sex, which is XY, and the male sex, which is XX. So there is one part of the genome of a female cuckoo which has only ever had experience of female bodies, and a robin cuckoo female, her Y chromosome can look back on a long history of nothing but robin nests. Well, not quite nothing but at least for a long way, nothing but robin nests. A reed warbler female has got a Y chromosome that can look back on a long history of reed warbler nests. All the other genes in the genome can look back on a mixed history of all the different species that are parasitized. But the Y chromosome has unique experience. And so the whole thing is explained on the hypothesis that egg coloration is carried on the Y chromosome. And that enables females to be specialists in one particular kind of host. They learn which kind of host they were brought up in themselves, and so this learning process sees to it that the Y chromosome has this unique experience. Now, every now and again, a female cuckoo will, of course, make a mistake. They're not perfect. Nothing's perfect. So a reed warbler cuckoo, for example, may by mistake lay an egg in a robin nest. And of course, her egg will then be very conspicuous. It won't look right. And the chances are that it'll be killed. It'll be thrown out by the foster parent. But that's how these new genties, as they're called, female races, these new genties come into being by females making a mistake. Now, if you look at the perfection of the egg mimicry in the different genties, the different races of females, only females have races. The males are all the same race, if you see what I mean. Robin cuckoos are exceedingly poor mimics of robin eggs. Meadow pipit cuckoos are exceedingly good mimics of meadow pipit eggs. And the hypothesis of Nick Davies, who's the main person who worked on this, is that cuckoos and their hosts are engaged in what's been called an evolutionary arms race. Arms races occur between predators and prey, parasites and hosts. And the idea is that robin cuckoos have only recently entered upon their arms race with robins. And therefore, neither the cuckoos have had time to develop perfection of egg mimicry, nor have the robins had time to develop perfection of discriminating the eggs. And that's why the egg mimicry is poor, and yet it still works. Whereas meadow pipits have been engaged in a much longer arms race against meadow pipit cuckoos, and that's why both of them have reached perfection, have reached a much higher level of perfection. On the cuckoo side, the egg mimicry, and on the meadow pipit side, the discrimination. Isn't nature wonderful?
Cool. Fantastic story.
Bill? Cuckoos?
Cuckoos. Sort of. Ah, great. Science! Thank you all. It's so good to see you. Unlike, I believe, all of my colleagues, I am an engineer. I mean, let me emphasize, like my colleagues, I'm a human, but engineer. And maybe some of you saw that right away. People recognize you at parties. Hey, you're an engineer. Your pants don't reach the floor. That's how you can tell. Hey, listen, man, can you fix the blender? I mean, you're the engineer. Yeah, I can fix the blender. Here's what you do. Hold the plug in the wall firmly. And then just hold the blender motor under some cold running water. Now, see, that's funny if you're scientifically literate. So my older brother, tremendous influence on me, had a wonderful physics teacher, Woodrow Wilson High School, Washington, D.C. And he told my brother the story, who told me the story. Michael Faraday, in 1828, then through 1831, would do the Christmas lectures in London, which is back east someplace. And he did this demonstration where he had a coil of wire on one end of a laboratory bench connected to another coil of wire by two wires, the terminal wires of the coils. So he goes down here with a bar magnet, reasonably powerful magnet, which you could find in those days, and moves it, if I may, in and out of the coil with respect to the coil. And then, no. Here's the thing, I was in college, okay? And I don't want to trouble you. I know there are a lot of grown-ups here and stuff, but that never goes away. It's still funny. The X, Y, X, it's still there. So he moves the magnet at this end of the table, and the compass needle moves at this end. As if by magic. Of course, it wasn't magic, it was science! Yes. So the story was embellished. And it was presented to me that he did this demonstration with such success so often that he presented it to the Queen of England. And the Queen of England is supposed to have said to him, "Mr. Faraday, of what use is it?" And here's where I just admire the guy, and I admire what we in the United States perceive as the British way of thinking. He did not say, "Lady! What? Are you, would you look? That's at that end, I'm at this, I'm not touching it. What? Are you high? I mean, come on."
I love it. You guys are awesome.
But that's not what he said. According to the story, he said, "Madam, of what use is a newborn babe?" Now, I don't know how much time you have spent with newborn babes, but they're not that useful. They're loud, and they leak, and there's a lot of times they don't seem to understand a word you say to them. But with that said, everybody, first of all, I mean, looking with all due respect, it was King George IV at first, and then it was William IV, so there was no queen involved. When I did the Science Guy show, we had a researcher who was very diligent about this, and he never presented it to the monarch. He presented some woman, a normal person, came up to him and asked him this question. But look around, everybody. Everything in this room, everything, the lights, the curtains, the paint, the clothes you're wearing, the upholstery, the floor, the stage, everything here owes its existence to that discovery. To the discovery that not only is there a connection between electricity and magnetism, but there's a connection between electricity and the moving of the magnetism, the flux. And that discovery, dare I say it, changed the world. But this process of science that this guy spent, I guess, he took tremendous pride in his demonstrations, and he really perfected this to show it to people. This discovery had a deep effect on me. Now, when I was a kid, I delivered the newspaper. I was a paper boy. That was the title. In the Washington Post on Sundays, there'd be Ripley's Believe It or Not. It's still there. It's a different paper, but still there. And it would say from time to time, they would run the story roughly, according to aerodynamic theory, bumblebees cannot fly. And this made quite an impression on me. And I spent some time watching bumblebees. And it became clear to me that the bees are fine. The problem is with the theory. So I wonder, continually, how many things are right under our nose that we just don't know anything about. I had a Sky Streak airplane, which are still manufactured, and the older boys showed me how to lubricate the rubber motor with dishwashing soap, and I wound that thing up, man. I wound up that rubber band, and I got the thing wound up 350 turns, man. And I read on the back of the package that you can steer the aircraft by bending the vertical tail, the rudder, making a rudder, sort of. Bend. Now, okay, this is an eyewitness account, and it's from one guy. Eyewitness accounts are imperfect, and this is the way I remember it, okay? Now, most of the time when you operate these aircraft, if you've ever tried it, it's two hands. You throw it like that, or you throw it like that. But one time I threw it, and it made 3 perfect circles, and it came right back to my hand, like a boomerang with Bugs Bunny or something. And then I realized that I could influence objects. I realized that if you could understand things enough, you could make things and shape things and imagine traveling around the world. And you could do it with a balsa wood airplane. Just think what you could do if you worked for a big company like Boeing. And that's what I ended up doing. I worked on 747s. Relax, everybody. I was very well supervised. But these things that happen to you when you're a little kid influence you so much. And I'll bet you everybody in here is a science enthusiast, got excited about it before you were 10 years old. And this passion, this drive to know our place in the universe is what makes us special. It's what makes our species worthy. And with this PB&J, this passion, beauty, and joy, we can, dare I say it, change the world. Thank you. Be engineers, you people. Thank you.